welcome to our main episode. That is the actual Mies Joseki, the episode that you've been waiting for, the very, very long episode with many, many lectures on Mies Joseki and all the very complex variations. So today we will cover some basics for Mies Joseki. When white honeys, black bumps into white and white extend up, black push, white blocks, and now we have... in the last episode, we covered the outer cut. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and I hope you guys became master of it. I think I've covered it pretty well. So the reason, as I said, the outer cut has been eliminated, sort of, in the professional world is because there are variations where black is gonna lose the win rate by like a few percentage points, and that matters a lot for professionals. And therefore, they discovered the inner cut. That is a better variation according to AI. Against the inner cut, white needs to deal with these two stones first because that's the target of attack. So white plays the very beautiful Tsuji, that is to play. Usually when you have a shape like this, the second line Kusumi is pretty much always a Tsuji. So against this move, black of course can rush to protect the corner because then your stone will just be captured. Black extends, and now the first thing white cannot play is to play connect. It looks like this move protects everything over here, but then when black extend down, we see that it's very difficult for white to escape. If white plays the shape move, black can just play this very stupid looking Atari, and nothing white can do, right? White has to extend, and then we capture, and we can see black has all the territory, and a very nice outside too, and white is clearly broken into pieces. Of course, this is unacceptable for white. And therefore, white doesn't really connect. White has to push. This is a more efficient way to temporarily fix the weaknesses and also put pressure on black. So as you can see, Mies Joseki is a very fierce players at each other's throats type of Joseki. It's very easy to lose the game on the spot. So when white pushes up, black needs to be careful. Black has to play very tight as well. Like you can't just loosen up and play something like this, protect your corner, because then white is gonna hane. When black plays triangle, white just push and then push all the way to the first line, and white comes back and fix all the weaknesses with one single move. And now we can see that black is all confined in the corner and white's influence is everywhere. So this is unacceptable for black. And therefore, Mies Joseki plays like the hane. So now you can remember this shape. This is the very basic, the base shape for Mies Joseki. And this is where all the variations, how do I put it? This is where all the branches start. Okay, so there are a few main variations that I will cover in great details. Namely, I will first cover the connection. Okay, so this is probably the simplest way for white to play. And then I will cover the tiger's mouth. This is the second main variation that white can play. And then I'll cover this very tricky and niche variation of Ataring on the second line. This is also a main variation that is a little bit less known. I have played that like this in my actual game as well. So I'll cover this. This could be your place of forging secret weapons in a tournament. And then finally, of course, I will cover the main variation of Mies Joseki, the most complicated, insanely complicated, variation. This is just insane. And I think a lot of videos will be about this variation. Okay, so... But before all of that, let's first say a couple things. First of all, if black, so the player in the corner, okay, in this case is black player. Let's go back a few moves. In order to play this, you have to make sure you have the ladder here. So you must have a stone in the opposite corner like this in order for this to work, right? And the reason is that when this happens, when black honeys, if you don't have the ladder, if this is a white stone, then you're in trouble because white can cut. The reason this cut doesn't work is because black can Atari and then extend. And now there's a Miai. Black can Atari the two stones, and there's a ladder going on. Black can start with this Atari and ladder the three stones. And now white is in trouble trying to resist doesn't really work for white. It looks like, while on the surface, it looks like when you Atari, I can Atari you, and therefore I also fix my weakness here. Looks like a good move, but then when black plays the Atari and then clamp over here, then white is in trouble, right? So black's Atari here is a Sente, and he doesn't even have to play it immediately. Okay, so now if white plays the Atari, black will Atari here. And then when white gets out, then we have an Atari over here, and that's game over. Now, if white tries to struggle in the corner, black now has a Tsuji. Let's first exchange these two. And then black has a first line Atari. White takes, and black connects. And then white only has 2 liberties, and therefore this is also game over. So trying to resist like this doesn't really work. And therefore at this point, it's just collapsing. But imagine if it's a white stone over here, then white can just calmly play a shape move. And now there's no problem here. And if you can't ladder the stone, then black is broken into pieces, and this doesn't work for black. So always remember that in the diagonally opposite corner, when you are the player playing the attach, you have to have a ladder. You have to have the ladder, okay? It could happen in cases where you have the diagonally opposite, like, you know, when players take corners like this. For example, if something like this, then you have to really watch out. Do you have the ladder or not? Usually you don't when in this kind of Fuseki. Okay, so let's go back to the variation. So when black honeys, today we'll cover the simply white just connect, right? This is a very solid move, and this is honestly not a bad move. This is a very good move that I would suggest to you. But obviously, I mean, if you are watching my videos on Mies Joseki, you probably be looking for like the most complicated variation to trick your opponent. I understand, but I just want to cover this variation in case you encounter this, or in case you want to play this someday. When white connects, black has to protect the corner. Therefore, he has to extend, and now we can cut black here. Now here, usually we see black plays the empty triangle. It's an ugly shape, but black plays it anyway. The reason you play it is because you don't really want to struggle here, because white can extend. When you play like this, well, white can just turn, and yes, you can capture the stones locally by playing Hane Connect, but this is not really a good exchange for black. Black was able to gain a little bit extra territory, but then white was able to obtain a lot of more influence as well. So the exchange is not good for black at all. And therefore, a lot of times you just see players play the empty triangle, and that's the main variation. Now white pushes down, and black keeps going. White push down again. It's very important for black to extend onto the first line, because that's the best for points. White Ataris, black has to do whatever it takes to not give up the stone. White pushes up, black extend up, and white plays the Kema. And this is the Joseki that we all kind of know or have seen, at least. And usually, I mean, if you check other commentators, be like, yeah, the Joseki ends here. But actually, it doesn't, because the book move continues, right? There's still a lot of book moves. So the book move for black is to play this Kema. So this is a very tricky move. This is trying to bait white into push and cut. If white push and cut, then black will just Atari and make a tiger's mouth. Now, this push and cut really helped black fix his shape, while also creating weaknesses in white's shape. Okay, so for example, this group is under a lot of pressure, and you probably have to get out in some sort of way. Let's say, for example, you try to get out like this. Then black has another push and cut. Probably he won't do it immediately, but this is very severe, as you can see. At this point, probably he just like play a small knight, exchange a few moves, and then aim at this push and cut later. So white has a lot of insecurities, and this group is also very insecure, and black only has to deal with this group in the center, and therefore this is an easier game for black moving forward. So push and cut for white would be falling into a trap, and therefore we don't see people push and cut here. Rather, white needs to settle the group over here. And then here's a very interesting difference, right? For a lot of players, they'll be like, okay, I'll just play a 3-space extension, right? Anywhere, like, oh, the high or the low, you know, like I don't really care. But apparently this matters a lot, right? So if you play the 3-space high extension, it's an okay move, but I personally don't recommend it because later on, when black plays the invasion or approach, and then if you don't respond to this, there's a very serious local follow-up. Black is gonna peep in, and this makes white very awkward because your stone is on the fourth line. Now, if you play the Kosumi, then black is gonna clamp. This is a very nice Tsuji. And now if you try to connect, black will capture your stone in Sente because there's another push and cut. So you have to fix that problem, but then black was able to get all that in Sente, and now white doesn't have enough ice space, and white also has to run. So this is a very serious local follow-up. Now, for example, if you play the attach on top, black still has this move, right? This is still very annoying. When white connects, black can just jump back like this, not only helping his approaching stone, but also getting rid of the roots that white has, and white has to run for his life as well. So it's a very severe follow-up. And therefore, what I recommend to my viewers is to play the low 3-space extension, and this leaves no weakness, right? For example, now if you try to poke me, then I can just play the crawl. Now, because my stone is very well placed right now, then, you know, black can't really do much about this shape. So white is very secure like this. Okay, so that's the difference between the low and the high. And at this point, one other final thing I want to say is that black pushes on top and white jumps, and that's the end of the Joseki. And the book would tell you that this is an equal position because black got the territory, but of course white got influence on both sides, and black has an insecure group in the center, so it's very unclear, and therefore it's very dynamically equal position. But it's very, very important for you to realize that in order for you to play this Joseki, you have to make sure that this is a white stone instead of a black stone. Because if this is a black stone, this makes it very awkward for white. I don't like this position for white, and I think white is just objectively worse here because of this stone. Your influence is facing a black stone. So when black plays a move, it's like you can't really build over here, and the direction is just wrong. Okay, so the reason I'm mentioning this is like when you choose Mies Joseki, the direction matters quite a lot. Now, let's illustrate this, you know, Joseki once again. Let's try a different variation. Well, let's try a different direction. Okay, so we'll just play out this Joseki so we can review it while we learn about direction. So when black honeys, white connects, that's our main variation. Black extends down, white cuts, and then we have this happening, Atari, push, Kema. Okay, and then we secure our group on top. When black push, then we jump. And now we can see that this stone is helping our group here to build an influence. And this is very good for white. And you can choose this Joseki like this, no problem. But previously, if it's the wrong direction, it wasn't a great choice. The full course on the Flying Knife Joseki is a bit over 3 hours in total. You can access the entire course by becoming a member on Patreon, or simply purchase the full course for just $5. All details are available in the video description. In the last lecture, we covered white's connect over here. That's one of the main variations. It is a main variation, but it's actually very simple. I think in my lecture I explained pretty much everything, and I think it should be pretty intuitive. And I talked about the details, whether you should play the high 3-space extension or low extension, and also in terms of direction of play. So today we'll be looking at a very similar variation that is for white to fix it with a tiger's mouth. So the idea is the same. White wants to sacrifice the 3 stones over here to gain outside influence, but in a slightly different way. Black will still extend, white cuts, and black follows the same logic of just capturing the corner. Here, white cannot choose the previous variation by attaring here. This would be a bad variation for white, because now we can see that the tiger's mouth is a lot worse than simply connecting after this. If we still follow the same Joseki, black can throw in here. White takes, black ataris, and white has to connect. And now we can see there's a very serious liberty problem for white, and this is just not pleasant. So the idea of white playing the tiger's mouth is to not Atari like this. Rather, black or white's correct move is to play an extension towards the top. So that's a more practical way of playing. Now here, black can follow up by limiting white's development over this direction. And now white plays a shape move, completely controlling the black stone over here. So now this is not a great time for black to really drag out the stone, because then white can attack the stone. As you can see, this is not a great fight for black because white has so many stones surrounding the two stones. And these guys are just outnumbered. So it's better for black to just leave it hanging here. And then white wouldn't really spend a move to try to capture it either, because now the outside, there's so many big moves, right? So when black approaches, you probably have the answer. And then at this point, it's just a game, right? Locally, this is there's a ceasefire over here, and we're just playing somewhere else. And the result of this is black gained the territory. White temporarily controlled the stone over here and gained some side influence. So that is pretty much the only difference between white connecting and playing the tiger's mouth. And then the tiger's mouth is not very it's not very common. You don't see this a lot in the Mies Joseki, and I think a lot of players simply just don't know this move, but it's actually a very common, or I would say it's a very main variation, where the idea is not to Atari, rather to play the two-space extension, right? And then spend another move to control the stone over here. So if you love influence, then this is definitely a good position for you. This main variation is actually very simple, but I do want to spend a little bit more time to talk about the local follow-up so you guys feel absolutely comfortable with this particular variation. So one of the possibilities is what I just said. Black will play the big knight. The idea is to stay very practical and take the territory in the corner. White spends another move to control black stone. So later on, what the players are fighting for is basically black is trying to drag the stone out at some point in the game, very later on in the game, not right now. And then white's job is basically to say, hey, your stone is pretty much dead, right? All of this influence belong to me. So the players will be fighting for this stone at some point later on in the game, and that's a dynamically equal position. The other possibility is for black to directly drag out. This is also a very legit follow-up for black. The idea is to not let white control the stone and create insecurities on both sides. So black is investing in this guy, dragging it out, and causing trouble for both sides. That's also a very good idea. White will follow up with the extension. So this is always the shape move against an extension like this. I'm pretty sure you already know. And at this point, black plays the hane. The idea of this hane is to protect this cutting point so he can play the kema after. White plays with a shape move. This is a really good move in terms of ice space and shape. The reason this is a great move is that later on this block is a sente against the corner, and therefore the shape move is the second line. Black follows up, and now we have white having this very brilliant move, looking at the weaknesses that black has, and also expand towards the top, and then also kind of get himself out. This is a very nice move if you're an aggressive player. If you're not so aggressive, playing a move that connects your moyo, or let's say this stone is a black stone, then you can extend yourself out, making sure this group is safe with a little bit of territory. Both options are very good. You can choose according to your style. So at this point, we covered the two simplest variations, that is for white to connect and white to play the tiger's mouth. And then the result is more or less similar, where both players settle down and there's no huge fights, and then it's just a peaceful game moving on. So next up, we're going to be talking about the two remaining very complex variations, and there's pretty much like most of my series will be about. One of them is to Atari on the second line, and the other one is the famous Mies Joseki and the Flying Knife Joseki, basically. So we're gonna, in the next lecture, we'll start with our third main variation, that is the Atari on the second line. This is a very tricky variation as well, very unknown. I guess not a lot of amateur players even know how to handle this. So if you know, this gives you a huge advantage. So we'll talk about that in the next lecture.